curiosity why.
Mad Bricks webcast,
Where the human spirit flies. Mad Bricks webcast, where the human spirit flies.
Hey, welcome to the MedBix webcast. This is Ramana Anam Raju. Let me turn off the music. Welcome to the MedBix webcast. This is Ramana Anam Raju. I'm the host here. Yeah, that's today. I'm going to introduce you one of my one of the first few guests. The first year or the second year, I think he was one of the guests. In the beginning days, and we grew quite a bit after that. Yeah, so it's a. But let me introduce you before that. My regular co-host, Susan Davis, Dr. Susan Davis. She's a missing in action because maybe she's chasing the hurricanes there in Florida. So I don't know much about it. But let me introduce you my another co-host, my good friend from Atlanta, Georgia, for a long time, Dr. Ursula Lentini. She is a doctorate on consciousness studies. She's a pranic healer, and then she teaches life coaching, and like Dr. Drummond, and then she does a lot of motivational speakers, and like Dr. Drummond. So let me introduce you, Dr. Ursula Lentini. Ursula, welcome, Ursula.
Yeah, Ramana, nice to be with you.
Yeah, nice meeting you again. Seeing you after a long time. So there are a lot of things going on in Atlanta. Tell me about it. It's I saw you some news in the news recently, right? A movie or something you did?
Yeah, I have a documentary coming out, and it's for young adults and their parents because we don't have a rites of passage in America, so they don't have a way to break up. So we have 28-year-olds still acting like 18-year-olds because nobody told them they were an adult, and the relationship between the parents and the children don't change. So this creates lots of tension in the household. So I have a documentary.
I know you do a lot of family therapy and family conflicts.
Yeah.
That's a very important one nowadays. Let me, without any further ado, let me introduce. Let me introduce him first. Let me talk about a little bit about him. So let me talk about the tonight. We are honored to host Dr. Dike Drummond. Dr. Drummond is a family physician, entrepreneur, executive coach, and founder of the HappyMD.com. The HappyMD.com. After graduating from the Mayo Medical School, very good school, prestigious, he spent years in a clinical practice and healthcare leadership before dedicating his career to helping physicians navigating burnout, wellness, and professional fulfillment. Over the past 15 years, Dr. Drummond has worked with more than 40,000 physicians across 4 continents. Oh my God. Helping doctors recognize burnout, rediscover purpose, and build more substantial careers. He is the author of several books on physician well-being and the host of the Physicians on Purpose podcast. His latest work focuses on topic that every physician will eventually face: retirement. In his book, let me say the Unchained. I think his book is talent work focuses on a topic that every physician will eventually face: retirement. To his new book, Physician Unchained, Retirement Mastery for Doctors, Dr. Drummond challenges the traditional view that retirement is simply a financial decision and explores deeper questions of identity, meaning, purpose, and life after medicine. Welcome, Dr. Drummond. Welcome to MedBix Webcast.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Now turn the music back on again. I want to do a little more dancing.
You're the right person for that music. You need drums. You need a bigger drums than that, the rock and roll. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is a book. We're going to talk about Unchained.
Physicians Unchained. And what we're talking about here is golden handcuffs. Golden handcuffs.
Did I miss anything in your introduction, Dr. Drummond?
No, that's great. That's excellent. Thank you so much. So what
Yeah.
happened to me though was this on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th of 2 years ago. It'll be 3 years this December. I had a stroke in the middle of the night.
Oh, really? I
I
didn't
woke
know
up on
that.
the floor. I was just trying to get up to go pee, but I woke up on the floor and my left arm had been replaced by a seal flipper. And I couldn't get even up on all fours. And my wife, who is an adult speech therapist who works with folks who've had strokes and Parkinson's disease, says, Dike, what are you doing? I said, I gotta pee. And she goes, oh my God, you're having a stroke. And she called the ambulance. Fortunately, they were only a couple blocks away. They scooped me up 3 a.m., took me down to the hospital, and the interventional neurology team was still in the hospital from a previous case. So they threw me into the CT scanner, slammed me into the cath lab, sucked a clot out of my middle cerebral artery. And what I ended up suffering was, and you can't tell, but I can, I suffered a brainstem pontine stroke, which
Oh my
affects the whole
God.
left side of my body in mild ways. But I'm used to being an athlete, so it's a pretty significant deficit for me. And if you think about it, for me, that's like the Grim Reaper fired a shot right across my bow. And I knew I was mortal before then, but now I'm certain of it. So what I did was I shifted gears from dealing almost exclusively in helping people recognize, prevent, and recover from physician burnout, helping physician leaders be more powerful leaders when they stop giving orders and become a servant leader instead, and move on to the whole conundrum of physician retirement, because physicians really struggle for a whole bunch of different reasons.
But sorry to hear that story that you tell, personal story
Oh,
that you said. Sorry to hear that.
I'm glad
But
I'm still
Drummond, you're always
alive.
energetic. I know you for a long time. The third time you're coming on my show. You're always energetic and high spirit. Sorry to hear that, but
No, I'm not
glad
sorry
you
at all. I am not
Yeah.
sorry at all. It is a gift because
I'm
I
glad you
can
recovered
tell you,
completely.
I'm not the only person who feels this way after having an experience that either was truly life-threatening or felt like it was life-threatening, that everything slows down, everything becomes sweeter. You realize, really, honest to God, you are mortal. Nobody's getting out of here alive. Birth has a death sentence attached to it. And the question is, if you devoted 40, 50 years of your life to working for the man, seeing patients who are sick, hurt, scared, dying one at a time, and you are and always have been one of the best and brightest of your generation, and you still are, and now you got a whole bunch of water under your bridge, you got a bank account that's full, what's next? Because the last stage of a doctor's life has never been retirement. That's the first thing that people have to get used to, and that is the word retirement is broken.
Yeah.
So let me give you the last two stages of my physician life stage model, which is different than something you might have heard before. So here's my life stage model. It has 4 stages. It has 3 milestones and 3 different transitions. So the first stage of a doctor's life is life before medicine. When you get accepted to med school, you enter into a transition called immersion, and your next stage is medical education. And that will always take at least a decade, right? And then you graduate, you become board certified, and you enter the next transition, which I call launch and mastery. And the next phase of your life, the next stage, is practice. And this is typically the longest one, because if you graduate at a normal time just before you're 30 and you practice till you're 60, well, there's 30 years worth of practice. And practice is a never-ending whirlwind of continuous stimulation. Everybody's asking you all the questions. You have to have all the answers, and everything you write down on paper gives you a malpractice trail that lasts 10 years. I mean, we can talk about the different levels of freedom. But at the end of your practice, when you reach financial freedom, which is a logical target for most physicians, especially here in the United States of America, where we get paid a bit more, once you reach financial freedom, you can trigger the last passage of a doctor's life. The last transition of a doctor's life is retirement. But retirement is a passage, it's not a life stage. What's the last stage of a doctor's life? It's life after medicine. So the question is, if you, and I'm going to say if you, because some people never pass this, if you reach financial freedom and if you're able to trigger the retirement transition, if you're able to step away from patient care, what will you build? What will you build in your life after medicine? It's as if you've been handed a cosmic pen to write your last chapter. And in most ways, what happens here, the reason that doctors are so challenged by letting go of the role of physician, at least in part, is because it's a narrative failure. Narrative meaning story, right? Tell me the story of a doctor's life. Well, they're smart. They go to school. They work hard. They get an MD. They practice really hard. Then they get rich. And then what's the last chapter? You get rich and then what? There is no generally accepted last chapter of a doctor's life, but you have an opportunity to pick up the pen and write that chapter and make it perhaps your finest chapter, because you're not restricted by the role and responsibilities and liability of being a doctor in the first place. So what I say to people is, look, at the point where you're financially free and you are capable of walking away from the obligation of an employment contract, nothing is ending except you are at the end of your beginning. This is the end of your beginning. And you're fully prepared for whatever happens next in whatever way you would like to draw it or write it or design it or live it. It is the ultimate cosmic do-over. And most doctors act like it's a death sentence. And we can talk all about that if you want.
I have a theory that you can verify that if it is true or not. But I think that when you are fully content at the retirement stage, when you don't have any problems, that is a death sentence itself. Because I think, the purpose is gone and there's no purpose. They think that they don't have a purpose, and then cells start committing suicide. A lot of people that without a purpose have probably die within a short period of retirement, without a purpose. You are, do you agree that my analogy, or a little bit about?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not in the least.
Okay. Just I'm
Not in the
verifying with
least.
you.
You're making
It seems like it's more of an identity, a re-identification, because as doctors, they're gods. Like you said, they have a lot of power. They have a lot of liability. They have they save people's lives, right? So the patients see them as a god, and they have relationships depending on what kind of doctor they are.
I hope they're not able to project that upon you as you go through your medical career. You're a god. Save me, God. Oh my God. I hope that's not true.
They don't think they're a god, but the patients see them as God because they're the all-knowing.
I would have drummed a patient out of my practice if they had projected godlike powers on me. I would have expelled them from my practice. And I think that's the healthiest thing to do. What we are is healthcare advisors. We're going to help you understand what the problem is, your role in both its origin and its solution. And that's my role. I am not here to be a god. I'm not here for you to follow whatever I tell you to do, because I'm the doctor and you're the patient, and you're supposed to, oh my God, that's such an unhealthy, abusive relationship. I hope that doctors don't practice like that.
They don't. It's not the doctor saying, I'm a god, come to me. It's the people saying, I'm lost, I'm afraid, I'm scared, I don't have answers, I'm sick. I need you to save me. I need you to help me. And as you know, many doctors save people's lives one way or the other.
What do you say to the patient? What do you say to the patient that come, they think like you're God? Or what do you tell them, Mom? How do you communicate?
God, but I'm just saying it.
Yeah.
No, but the doctor can pick up on the projection. We're talking about the looking glass self. This is a very old concept where you think you're seeing yourself reflected in their energy and their projections, when actually it's their projections coming on you. If I ever, and this is a very paternalistic way of practicing medicine, the older generation practiced this way. I started my practice with a group of doctors where two of them had been doctors who started their practice shortly after the Korean War. And they were more than happy to be the father figure in these patients' lives. And that's not the way I practice medicine. You are responsible for all the things that go into your health, your food, your exercise, everything, your sleep, everything. You are responsible for that. You cannot project that onto me. You cannot make me responsible for your recovery. I am an advisor. And if I ever thought that a patient was projecting onto me, they don't say it, but they're projecting onto me, tell me what to do and I'll do whatever you want.
Right.
It's not what I want. This is a piece of advice. And if somebody wanted to relate to me that way because they've been trained to do that by the paternalistic senior member of the group, I wrote them out of my practice immediately because that's not a healthy relationship.
I agree. And
so now I think you understand what I'm saying. Okay, good.
Yes, I do. But I also understand patients and the medical system and that power over. So let me not use that word because obviously it's too strong of a word. Doctors know that they have a lot of power. So when they retire, that status, that level of responsibility, that pressure that they come to, they have all the answers, that kind of collapses and they go home and their relationships, aren't there to validate them. So do you find that they have an identity crisis? Like I was the doctor and now I'm the pot and pan washer. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that is the number one thing. And identity has two different layers, okay? But let's just cut to the chase. If you think you are a doctor and you end up not doctoring, then who are you?
Right.
And when we say existential crisis, that's an abstract word. A part of you is dying. Dying if you can't play that role. If you made the mistake along the way, which many people do, medical education and practice is an extremely powerful brainwashing exercise. You cannot help but be conditioned by the exercise. I mean, it's effectively done at the end of the medical education process. And what we're trained to do is burn out. I'll just go through just a couple of quick things. And these are things that only I talk about. I don't know why. They seem so obvious to me. But I started not as an academic. I don't study things. I don't have discs of statistics that I would kill for. It's like a coach has a broken heart when a patient and when a client doesn't get better. A researcher has a broken heart when you lose their hard drive. And that's the difference between me and an academic, okay? I'm not abstract. This is roll up your sleeves and get dirty with people in the trenches. And I noticed patterns, and they seem to have an origin in medical education. Now, medical education has two prime directives. One is conscious. Everybody states it. Everybody believes it's true. It goes like this. I'm going to let you fill in the last word here. Are you ready? The patient comes
first.
There you go. And everybody would agree that that's true. Now, let me just set the stage here. Can, in fact, the patient come first 24/7, 365, and you have any hope of being a normal human being? Yes or no? No. So the conscious first prime directive that everybody agrees on is a trap for burnout.
I agree.
Now, there's a second one. By the way, doctors do not feel that they are powerful. We're powerless. Physician is a classic job where you have a whole bunch of responsibility and no power.
Wow.
A whole bunch of responsibility, but no ability to make sure that the result you want happens, because as soon as the patient leaves the office, they're on their own. They're going to do what they've always done. Smoke 2 packs a day, drink a fifth of whiskey, whatever the hell it is. Okay. Actually, I used the wrong word. They have a lot of responsibility, no control. A lot of responsibility, no control. Now, if I had responsibility and control, that would be power. But doctors are missing the whole back end of that. Okay. Second prime directive. You would only know this if you've been through medical school and residency and practiced medicine, because it's never said out loud unless you hear me say it. And it is deeper and darker and way more powerful than the patient comes first. And that one is never show weakness. Never do anything to make anybody think you don't have what it takes. Now, and this one is viciously misogynistic and racist, because I'm a big old white guy, and I acknowledge that 100%. I can say things and get away with things, but I'm a large, white, male, straight, English-speaking, born an American citizen. That
Mhm.
makes me from the standpoint of unconscious biases, the most powerful individual on the planet. And so if you, as you're listening to me right now, don't resemble me in all those data points, let's say perhaps you're a young, petite, cute female born in a country other than the United States and English is not your second language, this never show weakness programming is going to pound on you your entire career, because you literally have to be 3 or 4 times as good as me to get half the respect.
That's right.
And I've seen that over and over and over and over and over again, because our nation, our healthcare education, all of it is fundamentally racist and misogynist. And we can go into all the different studies that have proven that's true.
Can I pause you to
Sure.
thank you? To thank
okay.
you for being conscious right now, because it's not common. It is needed in this world. And it's like people like you who can say, I am that, but I don't want to be that. I've been put in that box. I'm going to use my voice, my ability, my privilege to include everybody else. This is a rare case. And I appreciate that you have a microphone, that you have a book, that you have a voice, that you're in a position of leadership, because we need men like you to make a voice for this stance. So thank you for being who you are and articulating that.
Yeah.
Oh,
he was one of the things that Dr. Drummond does.
Stop. Time out. It's the least I can do.
I agree, but at least you know.
Dr. Drummond, one thing is you're very good, a little bit dry, but very, very sharp for your answering questions and answers. But let me ask you a question that I'm going to dispute with you a little bit about the doctor's orders, for example. The non-compliance patients, we have a EMR data that is saying that there's only 20% to 30% are non-compliant. That means they believe the doctor's orders, the rest of them are, they believe in doctor's orders. Not directly, there is no control, is a kind of taking to the limit, So what do you think of that, my disagreement with you about that?
Well, first of all, I would ask, and again, if we need to get into the weeds, we can, but that's not the subject of today's conversation. When you say non-compliant, I believe you'll find if you look at those studies, they were probably asking whether or not the patient took the pills they were prescribed. Yeah. But the reason we have no control over outcomes is all the social determinants of health, all the dietary exercises, all the lifestyle issues that we usually, because we're Western medical practitioners and we're under the hypnotic spell of the pharmaceutical industry, we think that medicine is what you need. No, you eating 1,000 calories a day more than you needed for 40 years is what we needed somewhere along the line. So that measurement of non-compliance is crap. I'm just going to say it out loud. It doesn't imply that I have any control. If they take my medicines, that's 10% of getting better in most chronic illnesses.
I agree with you. Very, very well said. Okay. Now, let us ask you the question on the burnout that you did spend 20 years. Is there any connection between the burnout and the retirement kind of a thing? Did you find any a transient flow between them?
Yeah, there's a lot of connection. The same forces, like the patient comes first, never show weakness. How can you even think about retiring? What am I going to do without you, doctor? Doesn't the patient come first? I mean, yes, they're intimately related. By the way, I just want to remind everybody that about 50% of doctors, if you measured burnout nationwide today, are burned out. About 50%. It's been that way ever since COVID. And every doctor knows somebody, and sometimes 2 and 3 and 4 people who are colleagues or acquaintances or friends of theirs who've committed suicide. So this is an ongoing, active range fire. And what's happening too is that we're working through the baby boomer bulge of doctors and nurses in the workforce. So the workforce is collapsing. And the doctors that are graduating from their education today are not the same doctors as a boomer doc. And it's because of the fact that in about 2004, there was a case about a patient in New York who died under the supervision of 2 residents who'd been up for 24 hours. And the university was sued, saying it was the residents' overwork and lack of sleep that caused the patient's death. And they won. And that's what put into place work hour restrictions for resident education in America. And I believe that that's been promulgated in other countries around the world. But what ends up happening is the way they abused us. I actually worked 127-hour week on the pediatric ICU rotation as an intern in Sacramento General Hospital back in the 80s. But prior to 2004, there were no work hour restrictions. You would typically go into the hospital at 7 in the morning and leave at 5 the next day. You'd be in overnight and the whole next day and leave at 5 the next day. And then you'd repeat that after one night's sleep. So one on, every third on. Now, what ends up happening is, obviously, it's going to be healthier for the resident to not have to work so hard, right? Maybe it's better for their quality of their work when they are up and about. However, at the end of residency education, what ends up happening is these doctors are getting the same board certification with 1/3 less patient contact hours than doctors from my generation.
Oh.
1/3 less patient contact hours. And so one of the things that I've had as a habit, and by the way, if you're training 40,000 doctors, that means it's a whole bunch of gigs where a CMO or a CEO brought you in to train their physician employees on how to prevent burnout. So I've talked to a whole bunch of C-suites. And one thing I always ask every CMO, and I've asked hundreds of them, is this simple question. Hey, when one of your boomer docs retires, how many of these new grads do you have to hire to replace them? I've never had an answer less than 2, and many people will go 3 and 4. But
Yeah,
what ends
oh
up
my God.
happening is any shortage that you've ever seen of physicians projected for 2030, and the last one I saw said it's 300,000 short on doctors, and the nursing shortages are even worse because the baby boomer bulge is even bigger in nursing.
Mhm.
Any shortage that you've heard from the government, if they put it in a number, 300,000, you can double that. You can double that. And when you talk to boomer doctors who have new graduates with them, what ends up happening is it's a different doctor. It's a different doctor. Now, they have healthier boundaries, perhaps. They're less exhausted, perhaps. But what ends up happening is the boomer doctors, for instance, I've heard people complain about this a lot. You know, here we are, 3 boomers and a couple new grads, and we got this family practice service. And, you know, it comes 5 o'clock and there's still 4 patients in the waiting room, and the new docs punch out and go home because they've always been able to punch out and go home at 5 o'clock. And then you listen to the boomer doctors talk about these new doctors, and here's what they say consistently. They don't know how to take care of patients, and they don't care.
Right.
They don't know how to work
That is
hard,
scary.
and they don't care.
That is
And
a very scary.
what's happening now is you've got wholesale collapse of services across the United States. Classic
Yes.
story. 6-person neurology service in an academic hospital system in a major US city. Well, one got Parkinson's disease and quit. One retired. Now there's 4. They're still seeing the same 6 doctors worth of patients. Okay. And if any of these remaining doctors, who are all boomers, talk about retirement, they get dumped on. You can't retire. And then what happens is it activates the survivor guilt in the doctor themselves. And they say, when they even think about retirement, what happens is the first things that come up in their head are, well, who's going to take care of my patients? Who's going to take care of my staff? Right? Now, this is survivor guilt. Okay. It's nothing other than that, but it's also a guilt trip that both patients and staff and administrators dump on doctors when the healthiest thing for them to do is retire. I had a case that I talk about in the book where it was a neurology service. I'm describing her service, and she was in her early 60s and her husband was 70. And both of them were doctors, and both of them were still working full time. And she came to see me for burnout. And her husband had even had a stroke and had a significant deficit. And they were worth $12 million. And I said, why are you still seeing patients full time? And it was what about my patients? What about my staff? And I said, get out of there. I actually pulled almost an intervention. I didn't go to where she lives because she lives on the East Coast and I live on the West, but it was almost, I needed to put a big stage hook around her and pull her off stage, right? Because the one thing she was afraid of was that he was going to die before they had a chance to go to Europe. And so we successfully got her extricated there. But here's the thing. The US healthcare system is collapsing. It's in about the 7th inning of a slow burn collapse. And I actually surveyed my doctors on my mailing list, had about 7,000 doctors as I sent out the survey. And I said, okay, great. Do you think we can reform the current system in a way that it would not collapse? Do you think we can stop it before? Do you think we can stop it before it collapses, or do we need to rebuild from the smoking crater after the collapse is over with? And 70% of them picked option 2, and I believe option 2 too. It's got to collapse. There's too much dirty money in the background and all the political forces against this. There's too much profit for all the private equity firms that it has to collapse. And I think we're in the late stages of that. What it means is all these boomer doctors are sticking way too long in their jobs because if they leave, the service collapses. And it's not their responsibility to support a for-profit employer, to support the insurance companies with their life. It's time to get out of there, especially if you're financially free. Dear listener, if you're financially free, get out of there. Because if you don't, here's what's going to happen. We know this outcome. We know the regrets of the dying. There have been a number of different surveys and books written about the regrets of the dying. And the number one regret of dying people is, I should have retired sooner. So if you are capable of retiring now, meaning you're financially free, do it now or you're going to disappoint your future self and be on your deathbed with a major regret. And that's one of the goals of my community around this book. Goal number 1 of your life after medicine is to die with no regrets. Goal number 2 is a bit more technical. You create your ideal life after medicine description. We're going to help you get to 80% of that. In a Venn diagram, 80% overlap with your ideal description and die with no regrets. I think those are 2 fairly noble goals.
Yeah, that sounds very,
Go ahead,
very
Ramana.
Yeah, the question I have is that you already answered the question. What is the reason for the collapse of the system? Healthcare is broken. You said you're saying that private equity firms and one of the acquisition. I don't know what is it true. The doctors don't care about patients. He said that's a very strong statement, but
I didn't say that.
No, he was saying the older doctors, the boomer doctors think that the new doctors don't care. That's why they're leaving at 5. And that's why the boomers are so responsible as a duty, as a calling in their life.
It's a perception problem. It's a perception problem.
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
they
It's
feel
a perception, not a problem.
it's a calling. It's a calling, and they spend more time at work than they do at home, and the people, the staff become their family. So it's like you wouldn't retire from being a father. You know, that's kind of how it feels. Like you owe these people, you love these people, you have relationships. So I can see why it's very difficult.
Let us talk about
the future, like the future of medicine, right? Is that what you're going to ask, Ramona?
No, let us talk about purpose. That is identity and purpose that he was talking about. And I went through this crisis, even non-physician, what I do in life, and then moved to Silicon Valley from Atlanta, and then doing different things, different platforms I got involved with and then when I don't have the purpose, it was a very frightening, to be honest with you. It was a frightening. So then I got the podcast. Now I got friends and I have purpose. That was really motivated me quite a bit, Dr. Drummond. You're absolutely right that purpose and identity is such a powerful force. Tell us a little bit about that, how the doctors should refocus that purpose and identity, actually.
Well, let me widen the aperture first. And what I'll say is that my book is written in a way that any person who derives purpose from their work, any person who puts their clients first, is going to feel that this information is useful. because I'm not writing about money. I'm writing about the inner resistance after years in a specific role, especially doctor, the inner resistance to pick up the pen and write your next chapter. And let me just go one layer deeper on this whole identity thing. Again, if you think you're a doctor, right? I am a doctor. And by the way, that's the way doctors talk. If you go to a cocktail party where people are asking the usual question of what do you do for a living? Doctors won't say I work down at the hospital. They won't say I'm in healthcare. They'll say I'm a doctor, or even more specifically, I'm a physician. To the extent that you feel that your identity is fused with the role, it's a role. Okay, so Tom Hanks was Forrest Gump in the movie Forrest Gump, but then he figured out a way to not be Forrest Gump after he got done with the movie. He didn't accept the Oscars as Forrest Gump, okay? It's a role. It's a very elaborate role, very ritualized, okay? Both in terms of the position and the rank and the identity and the belonging in a particular anointed position at the apex of the care team. All of these things are very ritual, but it's a role. It's not who you are. However, you become conditioned to believe that it is. And if that's true, if you're not doctoring, that is, we say identity crisis, but basically you have to take those abstract terms away and say, it feels like you're dying. So most doctors, when they talk about retirement, what they have energetically is this mopey, Eeyore-like energy around, oh, it's my first step on the slow trudge to the grave. I'm all washed up, or I'm just generically afraid of retirement. It's like a black box. It's my little crystal ball here. By the way, you can't see through that. I've got a better one. I've got a better one, by the way.
Okay.
Ooh. So what ends up happening is it's almost like they feel like they're walking the plank. And here's what happens when you're identified with a role like this. Check it out. You're familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grieving, right?
No, explain to us, please. I don't know her.
Go ahead and give them to us. I have to look them up.
Okay, so in death, which is really loss. So when people have a lot, you can go through the death stages if you lose your keys or your phone. But in loss, there's 5 emotions that happen, and it's not in order.
Denial, which is the most primitive and powerful of any human subconscious
Anger,
defense mechanism. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And what happens is when your identity is doctor and you begin to contemplate the end of doctoring, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of loss and grieving come swinging into your energy fields and it knocks you out. And the easiest one is denial. Retirement? Oh, no, we don't need to think about that right now. Or retire? I don't want to retire. I got things to do. Bargaining, depression, it's all there. So what happens is we take an ordinary transition process, and if we compare that with the trans-theoretical model, I'll read you the stages of that, right? So if you're contemplating a change in your life, there's pre-contemplation when you're not thinking about it. There's contemplation, you're thinking about it. There's preparation when you get all set. There's action to make the transition, and then there's maintenance to maintain that new state. That's very logical, very literal, no particular feelings in mind. But then if denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, if that comes swinging into your thought process, it knocks you out. So most doctors don't plan for retirement. And what ends up happening is that they end up at the point of retirement, when they become financially free, they end up at a place where they've got a big gap between the energy and that they have at work, the energy and focus at work, and their life. There's a big gap between these two. And if they attempt to retire from this position, the fall is so big, they tend to bounce. And everybody knows doctors who retired for a month or two and then came back and then did it again and then came back. But if what you do is you begin to, in anticipation of your retirement, you begin to add components to your life, maybe a hobby.
I love that graph.
or you step away from work, you stop taking night call, or you stop doing weekend call, right? Or you step into a 0.8 FTE. What happens is what I call ladder up your life, ladder down your work, and then you've got a nice little gap that you can just bunny hop into. And then
Love
the
that.
transition isn't
nice.
so abrupt. And that's just a technique to make it easier at the time that you
Yeah,
do it.
excellent.
But
technique.
then the other thing we do is talk a lot about Arnold van Gennep's research about the 3 stages of a transition. This is a life transition. This is the last, apart from death, this is the last major life transition for a physician.
Right.
And life transitions have a classic 3-stage process. All transitions begin with an ending. All transitions begin with an ending. Now, typically we don't think about it that way. When we think about life transitions, you think about the thing that started. I started to do this, and then I started to do this, and we don't think about the ending, but all transitions begin with an ending. Then there's a place where you're not sure what the hell's going on. The neutral zone is what William Bridges calls it. And then, if you're patient enough to deconstruct your old roles, if you're patient and brave enough and have the means to take the time to deconstruct your own roles, you can find an infinite number of ways to express purpose and meaning and make a contribution that previously were only expressed by seeing sick, hurting, scared, dying patients one at a time in the role of doctor. It's an act of radical liberation. And learned helplessness is a big piece of the resistance as well. While I was writing the book and at various times during my coaching career, I've had this dream where I'm walking through a monkey lab, right? I'm walking down the aisle in the middle of the cages. On either side of me, there's lines of cages, and there's a monkey in each cage. And maybe they got electrodes out of their skull or something like that. But I walk through and I unlock all the cage doors. And I walk out. And I come back the next morning, and where are the monkeys?
Back in the cage.
Still in the cages. Still
Yep.
in the cages. They never even walked to the doorway. It's the same kind of thing. There is learned helplessness. There is dopaminergic addiction. There is the golden handcuffs. This is how you're making a living and how you're going to make it to financial freedom. There's privilege, rank, and belonging. There's survival guilt. There's identity. And then there's one other layer of the identity issue, and that's this. And I heard David White, the poet David White, W-H-Y-T-E, express it this way. In a profession that requires a lot of academic study to acquire your credentials, and then a practice, a way of making a living that's highly stylized and very intricate, you develop a coping strategy for that role. You have certain things that you do in order to be a doctor that other people don't have to do because they aren't under the same pressures as you. And
Right.
what ends up happening is it may not be the role that you have identified yourself with. It could be the strategy. You become to believe that the strategy you use to be a doctor, to deal with that role personally, is who you are. And in either case, you're much more,
Dr. Drummond.
infinitely more than the role of doctor could ever contain. It's a tight little box. And you know what? If you're a square peg and doctor's a round hole, they'll just use a bigger hammer to knock the corners off the peg that you are and drive you in that hole anyhow.
I wanted you to address a unique problem Indian physicians have. I'm from India. You know, one of the, so as you know, so what is I interact with a lot of Indian physicians. There are a lot of numbers.
So
in
do
this
I.
country. Yeah. So one of the things is that they do is they build a beautiful big house, and then their children become doctors. They expect them, if they're independent practice, baby boomers generation, right? They have their own practices in small towns and big, small towns and rural areas. They expect their children to come and practice with them. They really get disappointed. The children run away, like far away from them, and they don't come back. And they have a big house, in a small town, and how that is a unique problem. And also then second problem is where they retire. They want to go back to India because they don't know anybody else. All of their friends are all older and everything. It is a unique problem. How do you solve that kind of a problem?
Well, first of all, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
I have to do this all the time. Burnout's not a problem. Retirement's not a problem. They're not problems because by definition, a problem has a solution. What's the solution? It's one thing you do one time and you never have to worry about it again. Well, is there one thing that you can do one time and solve what you just outlined to me right there? Do you think one thing would fix all that? No, then it's not a problem. So let's quit using that word incorrectly.
Okay.
That's the fantasy about burnout. It's a problem. We need to find a solution. And I've had CEOs project that shit on me for decades. Dike, burnout's a real problem around here. We need a solution. You're going to come and fix it, right? No. And then we have to have a 15-minute conversation about the difference between a problem and a dilemma.
Yeah.
A dilemma is a balancing point, right? How would the Indian parents who practiced in the small town and expected their kids to come back and practice with them actually create connections in this country so they didn't want to go back to India when they wanted to retire? What's that about? Well, that's like 45 different things they'd have to do for 45 years in order to rectify that. But yes, Indian born, Indian raised, Indian culture people tend to have a lot of pressure from their parents.
Yes.
And the parents have a very solid idea of what 3 professions are okay. Doctor, engineer, and then there's one more, but I can't remember right.
Lawyer.
Lawyer. There we go.
Lawyer.
Doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? Not the director of national intelligence.
No,
Sorry. So yeah, doctor, lawyer, engineer. But you tell me, you have children, yes?
Yes.
And
He
you
does.
had that pressure from your Indian parents, yes?
Yes. of
Did you
course.
put the same pressure on your children?
Yes.
And how did
did I put a Ursula may know my children and she knows my children too.
Well, then
What
you
do you
didn't
think,
learn your
Ursula?
lesson, did you?
Well, one said, "No, I'm not playing the regular game," and one said, "Oh, watch me knock it out of the park on her terms."
On her terms, right? Yeah, but you tell me whether, and it is a societal thing in India. It's just I hear it all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I would say because there are associations of physicians of Indian descent in America all over the place, right?
Right.
And so you tell me whether that societal phenomenon is a healthy thing or not. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, Jewish families will do that too.
Also,
And it's not anti-Semitic. It's just an observation.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how to even begin a conversation about that because it's a dilemma. If you were going to correct it, everybody involved in the dilemma would have to agree that it needs to be corrected. And then we would have to hammer out a very complex strategy and deploy it over decades to actually, and I don't even know what the desired state is. Is the desired state complete free will on the part of the child? I mean, you tell me.
You cannot solve by throwing under the carpet, right? The
No.
dilemma, whatever it is.
That's been tried.
Well, that is a strategy, but it's not
Right.
aimed at addressing the issue.
No.
That's denial. That's denial.
Ramona-
Remember, we said denial was number 1 for the Kubler-Ross stages.
Right. Ramona, I would like to ask Dr. Drummond, outside of the context of your book, but you brought us to the point, in your perception of what's happening and the history and where the future's going, what would you see as a new healthcare system? Eastern, Western, combined? What would you like to see? Do you have any trends that you're observing?
Well, what I think is, first of all, irrelevant because the freight train of AI is going to smash into healthcare worldwide real quick. It's only just begun, and we cannot know what the future will hold. But we do know that the future delivered by AI doesn't have to be good medicine. It just has to be acceptable to the patients of the time. So, for instance, I have 2 children. They're in their mid-30s. If they could get the attention from a chatbot about a medical question and drugs delivered to their door within 15 minutes by a drone, they might just think that's a pretty ideal medical encounter, even though it's totally insufficient. And the biggest thing that's going to happen when AI takes over, just like when we moved to telemedicine, is inappropriate antibiotic prescriptions causing huge problems with multi-drug resistant bacteria. But in an ideal world, people would have a very, and again, we're always oversimplifying the thing that's the most complicated in the world. The American healthcare system has to die because it is a tax on American industry across the board. I can't believe the business community puts up with it. We spend 10 times more than any other first world country, actually 4 times more than any other first world country. And our healthcare, our quality of life results for our population are abysmal. We're worst in the first world, and we spend way more than anybody else.
Yeah.
Way more than anybody else. And nobody cares because the system is fundamentally racist. Fundamentally racist. It has its origin in the racism of America that we were born with, that we originally came from. The last first world country to adopt a national healthcare system of one payer was Switzerland in the 1990s. And the reason that they did it by a national referendum where they voted for national health and the taxes to pay for it. And the impetus for that was the Swiss uninsured rate got to 15%, and the Swiss population was so appalled that 15% of their members were going without health insurance that they voted it on all of them. They voted it on themselves. That's the difference between a more advanced thinking about what is the role of government, right? And is healthcare a right or a privilege? And they obviously felt it was a right, just like every other first world country in the world. And we obviously think it's a privilege, meaning only the privileged get it.
Right.
And that means the white Christian elite. Let's not talk
what about the future of medicine in an ideal world?
The future of medicine, the first thing you can do that would make the most sense, and we've proven this by economic studies that have been out for 20 years, is single payer. Single payer means one payer. That means one of the ways to do it is what's known as Medicare for all. Get rid of private insurance companies because the only thing they do is they're like vampires. The only thing they do is suck the blood out of the system and provide no additional value, none whatsoever. So collapse private insurance into single payer, universal coverage. Now, you can debate on who's covered, but American citizens would be a place to start, right? And certain folks that are in the process of getting their citizenship. And now whoever's a MAGA crazy nut's going to be pulling their hair out just listening to me talk right now because they don't care. They don't care.
We don't
Minority people, foreign nationals, and black people can die in the street, and they don't care. That's just the way it is. But if you believe that healthcare is a right, and there's a certain, I believe it's a majority if people would get to the polls. If you believe that healthcare is a right, universal payer, right, one payer, single payer, universal healthcare for all.
But
is
there
the only
is
thing
a
to
way
do.
to.
And then what happens is you start to manage your healthcare budget as a nation. You start to manage it as a budget that you must live within, as opposed to a cow that you're going to milk to death for profit at every step of the way.
But Dr. Drummond, I have to, I think universal payer is maybe or may not be a great idea. But one thing I can tell you is that from the physics point of view, you can create a competition of at the fundamental level. We don't need an insurance company. Actually, we can get rid of insurance companies because AI can do that. The new computers, the fastest computers can get rid of all the risk analysis. The thing you can do that is you can buy in the market, free enterprise market. You can buy procedures, office visits, everything should be free enterprise system. That's what is missing in healthcare. That's one thing I differ. You may not like it the way I do, but I think free enterprise has a role in the healthcare system. For example, I used to have an imaging center. I used to offer $500 MRI, where you go to the doctors next door to the hospital. It's a $5,000. It doesn't make any sense. So that kind of a enterprise we need to allow to flourish because there is quality control. You can manage that through the new computers and new computer
90% of what you're talking about is simple price transparency.
Yeah,
90% of it is price transparency. And disintermediating the system. You don't have to go through insurance and stuff like that. But the challenge for what you just said is that system will never take care of people who don't have the funds. That system will never take care of
No,
all
I
of the
say government can go and buy for them. Government can go and buy for them.
That's the single payer. The single payer is a government
Yeah,
thing, like
well,
Medicare
whoever
for
it
all.
is, whoever it
And what
is
you're
can
doing
go-
is what you're doing is giving everybody a floor.
yes,
And the first thing that a conservative person is going to say is, well, that means I'll have to wait for 3 years for my artificial hip. Yeah, but you're going to get it paid for.
That's-
We're managing to
yeah.
a budget. You're going to get it paid for. And what's happening is it's a rising tide that's lifted, apart from your hip, millions of people that you're not aware of because you don't care about them.
We are coming to an end,
Ramon-
Doctor. Yeah, go ahead.
One more thing. Do you have, Ramona, have you told Dr. Drummond about your MedBricks program where it's international and universal, using technology to help third world countries and so on with their needs? Have you explained that to him?
No, I didn't talk with him, but I will definitely show it to him. Dr. Drummond, both of you should do a retreat together. You and Ursula Lentini, I think would be an excellent idea. Someplace allowed to in Oregon. Oregon is excellent. Washington, Oregon, any one of the places would be fantastic.
Well, let me just give you the tagline to my book before we go.
Yeah, let's talk about
Physicians
your book.
Unchained, Physicians Unchained, Retirement Mastery for Doctors, a new roadmap to stick the landing on this life of purpose.
I think you're one of the highest wisdom, Dr. Drummond. You provide such a clear path. Even your words are very sharp and it works very well. I think you're one of those people that I admire. And you're one of the,
Well,
what
thank
do you
you
think
so
about
much.
MedBricks? You've been a guest for me. What do you think of our podcast? Is it?
Well, there's conversations going on here you ain't going to hear anywhere else. I'll tell you
That's
that
for
right
sure.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's important. Pushing the envelope at the
Yes.
cutting edge. Right. And I love the intro music.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. It's truly an honor and a privilege. And connect with him, Dr. Drummond, and LinkedIn, Ursula. Okay, thanks. It's nice chatting with you, sir. It is a Unchained book. Physicians Unchained sales page link is there. We're also going to keep repeatedly playing that link for you guys. So
Please.
let us go and support Dr. Drummond's book. And it is actually opening to all of us.
I just want to say one more thing too. In addition to the book is a portal. The book is a portal into a whole system of support for people who are struggling with this important transition. So there is an audio book. There is a monthly print newsletter that I'll mail to you every month. And there's also an online support community. And we've been up and running for a month, and I've got 350 books sold and 50 people in the community with me. So it is something that I'm very excited about potentially becoming a movement.
Yeah. It is a movement, sir. Thank you so much. Your contribution to the physician community is undeniable. It is
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining with us. You're always a great supporter of MedBricks. Thank you so much for that. Thank you,
Thank
Ursula.
you for the opportunity. Thank you, Ursula.
Wonderful
Thank you,
meeting you.
Ursula.
Nice to meet you.
Last minute meeting me, joining with us. Thank you all.
Thank